guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, The Bright Side Girl, and today we're going to be doing my Not So Scary-a-thon reading wrap-up. Be talking about all of the books that I read and listened to for Not So Scary-a-thon, my fall Halloween themed readathon. I also recently uploaded a August/September reading wrap-up that I will link up in the cards for you guys. This is going to be everything I read kind of leading up to the readathon, and then I will have an October reading wrap-up that will have anything I read the rest of October as well. I read a total of 12 books for the readathon, which I thought was really good because I chose some larger books. I do have a few shorter ones too. I chose some bigger books than I normally would, and I was not feeling the best during the readathon, so I feel like overall the amount was good. It was a lot more up and down than I anticipated. I actually had 3 2-star books, and I was not expecting that from any of them, but I had a couple 4 stars as well. This readathon was all themed around vampires and villains for this year. I read 6 books for the vampire prompts and 6 books for the villain prompts. So we're gonna go in order from least favorite to favorite. I'll list the narrators down below as always. It's always good to know because that could just make or break, especially for all these audiobooks. So we're just gonna dive right in. So like I said, I had 3 2 stars, and it was hard for me to pick which one I liked the least, but I think we're gonna go with Vampires Never Get Old, Tales with Fresh Bite. I was just not expecting to dislike this so much. So this is a young adult vampire anthology. It was pitched that like all of these stories have kind of more modern influences to them with a bunch of different topics. I read the mermaid version of this that was edited by Zoraida Cordova and Natalie C. Parker for Mermaid Marathon, and I enjoyed that one. It was probably like a 3.5, but I had a good time with it. Anthologies are extremely hit or miss for me. Like I liked the mermaid one. I read a different one for my food themed readathon that I really liked, and then there is a Christmas/winter anthology that is like my all-time favorite that has a bunch of different young adult Christmas and winter tales. They're all so unique and magical. This one, part of it was it being YA, which we all know that I love to read YA, but I feel like this one had a lot more to do with like high school and growing up and contemporary things, and I don't like to read a lot of contemporary books. A lot of these felt more contemporary than anything. Some of them, the vampire aspects were so minimal or they didn't come up until the end, and they focus more on other topics like sexual identity, race, abuse, more harder hitting things that I don't always love in books, especially in a more contemporary setting. And they kind of just had vampires in them, or they used vampires as like a jumping off point, and it just didn't work for me because of that. I also felt like a lot of them were kind of boring and it just kind of didn't do a lot for me. They were all extremely short. Sometimes that happens with anthologies. I think there were only 2 stories in here that I gave a 3-star. Even the Victoria Schwab one, like I enjoyed it, but I wasn't loving it as much as I expected to because I love her writing, but it was the last one, so I didn't know if by the end of it I was just kind of like over the whole thing. So unfortunately this one just did not work for me. I feel like a lot of people might really enjoy this, especially those that are actually young adult, because it addresses a lot of those more realistic topics. Honestly, I just wanted more vampires and vampire vibes and vampire goodness, and this just didn't have enough for me. So a 2-star. This one did have a full cast of narrators, which I think really helped because at least we got to break up the stories with different voices. So I did enjoy that element. Next, we have Blood Countess by Lena Popovic. I was just not expecting this to be on this lower end. So part of it was my fault. I had this picked for the vampire category for a couple reasons. One, the cover and the title just screamed vampire to me. And also it's about Elizabeth Bathory, who I didn't know much about, but when I did a quick Google did me dirty and said that she was Dracula's first wife, but that's not true. So I think where the confusion came is that Elizabeth Bathory is a real person from the 1500s, and she was like a real life serial killer. She like tortured her servants and her maids and supposedly bathed in their blood, and that's why the title and the castle and everything. And then there is theories that she is actually the inspiration for Dracula and not Vlad the Impaler. So I think that's where I got mixed up, but this is not a vampire novel. This very much is about Elizabeth Bathory, and she tortures her maids and her servants, and we have our main character who comes to work for her and kind of is in charge of like taking care of her, and they kind of have a romantic connection, and she's kind of trying to draw her out of this evil side. I feel like the writing was really good, but I just did not love all of the torture elements. Like, they weren't too crazy descriptive, but there just wasn't enough in here for me to like enjoy the story. It was just a lot darker in those abusive, toxic topics that I don't enjoy. This is considered a young adult horror. Some people I've heard don't think it should be classified as a horror because it's more of like a historical fiction, but it definitely has some gruesome elements in here, especially for YA. So unfortunately, this just didn't work for me personally and was like a 2-star. I will say that the narrator for this one was really good though. And because this was not vampire, it wound up going in the villain category. Next up, we have Sign Here by Claudia Lux. This is an adult thriller. This one was just pitched all wrong. I was getting the vibes that this was going to be about workers in hell in like an office style setting and have like a lot of humor and silliness to it. And there is some of that, but it's not as funny and humorous the whole way as I was expecting. We get several plot lines in here. We're following Peyote, and he works in hell. He's basically a soul that has been sent to hell, and he has to work there and kind of like work his way up to better places in hell. That part was all really interesting. He teams up with this girl named Cal, and they're trying to get this one family to sign off their souls. They've got like a plan to do it, and you're also getting the perspective of this family and learning about them as they're like on a summer vacation and learning about things in their past. There's a little bit of like a murder mystery that you're trying to solve. There are a lot of POVs. There are a lot of time jumps bouncing back and forth between Peyote and Cal in their present time trying to sign this deal, and also in the past learning about Cal's past and learning little snippets of Peyote's. And then you're with the family and learning about their current drama and their current summer situation, and then uncovering things from their past. And it was very easy to get confused because of that. There was lots of jumping around. All the stories didn't necessarily connect together in the end. There were 2 plot lines that I felt like were completely unnecessary. I did actually like the mystery of the family and how it wrapped up, and what the surprise was one of the better reveals that I have read. However, because the whole book was so confusing and the plot line with Peyote and Cal, I really did not like the stuff with Cal's past. It was very abusive and very dark and just didn't add anything to the story or connect like I wanted it to. Also, the dad in the family that we're following is basically a pedophile. Nothing really happens with it, but he has gross thoughts about one of their daughter's teenage friends, and it really serves no purpose to the plot at all. Like, I felt like something was going to happen with it or come from it, and it didn't. It just felt completely unnecessary and kind of in there for shock value, which was really unfortunate because that alone pushed it from like a 3.5 to a 2.5. If we hadn't had that, and if we hadn't had Cal's plotline, this could have possibly been a 5-star for me, because I really enjoyed being with Peyote and learning the little bits about like hell and the office style situation. That was really fun. I wanted an entire book of that, but I also really enjoyed the family's plot in solving that mystery. They had an interesting way to solve it. It was just altogether kind of a mess though, unfortunately. And so this one is sitting at like a 2.5 for me, but the narrator, fabulous. Okay, then we have 2 that I did on audio that I do not physically own and didn't get in the library from time. So we had Tales from the Haunted Mansion. I just did this one last minute for the villain category. This is just a short 4-hour audiobook. It has 2 stories in it. There are, I think, 4 of these anthologies that each have 2 stories each. And basically they're like set kind of centered around the Haunted Mansion, but they're just like ghost stories, and they're middle grade, and it very much has like a Goosebumps vibe about it. It was fine. I didn't love it. I didn't dislike it. I thought they were very interesting, perfect for the spooky season. Middle graders, I think, will really enjoy them, especially if they like that Goosebumps style. The narrator was kind of cool in the beginning because it was like, "Welcome readers as we tell you the tales." And it was very creepy and cool. So this was like a 3-star for me. It was fine. It wasn't a new favorite, but I'm glad I got it in. And then I did So Thirsty from Rachel Harrison. This thankfully was a vampire novel. Again, one where this was kind of all over the place. Considered an adult horror chick lit, kind of. It just didn't feel like it knew what it wanted to be. There were times where I was like, oh, this is a horror, because the parts with the vampires or certain things were a little more gruesome than I was anticipating. Not bad, but just a little bit surprising. And then there were parts where it felt like a comedy because things were like really silly and stuff was happening that was kind of wild, but they made it funny. And then there were parts where I felt like it was a romance. There was like one tiny little spicy scene. And then there were parts where I felt like it was just about the friendship. And then there were parts that made it feel really serious and almost kind of heavy. Our main character in this is in her mid-30s and she has been married for a while. She's kind of over her marriage because she has found out that her husband has been cheating on her, but she doesn't necessarily want to leave because she feels comfortable with her lifestyle and doesn't want to uproot everything. And he winds up sending her on a birthday trip with her best friend, and that's where they kind of encounter these vampires. There is like a weird orgy party that they wind up going to. Our main character does not participate, and there's not really much description, and it's not really for spiciness. It's more like a humor thing, but I just want to warn people because I was like, oh, okay, and I wasn't sure where this was going. It was kind of funny. There are parts that I loved about this book because I thought it was funny. I really liked the ending. It just felt like it wasn't sure what it wanted to be, and I didn't really know what it wanted to be because it jumped around with the type of book that it was. I hope that makes sense. So I will try more from Rachel because I've heard really good things, and I know a lot of people are giving this 5 and a lot of people are giving this 2. So, you know, as always, opinions are subjective. This one was like a 3.5 for me. Next up, for the villain side, I read City of Villains by Estelle Lahr. I've been wanting to read this one for a while. I have it on my Retold-a-thon list, and I had it on this list for the villain. This is the first in a series that is supposed to be like a Gotham-inspired Marvel version of the Disney villain and like how they came to be. There's like a detective element. They're in this like Gotham style city. We have like Marvel type adventures, and you're getting like a different backstory on how the villains came to be. In this one, Ursula, Maleficent, and Captain Hook are present, and our main character is trying to solve the mystery. I believe Ursula goes missing, and she's her friend, and she's trying to solve what's happening, and like because the police aren't really doing a good job. We're in this world where we used to have magic, but it got taken away, and people talk a lot about how we used to have magic and all these things. I really liked it. This had similar vibes to Renegades from Marissa Meyer, which is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. This one's not as good as that, but it had similar vibes to it, kind of like a superhero element more so than fairy tales, but it had both mixed in. This would be great for next year's Retold-a-thon as well. I'm getting ready to read the second book in the series, so that will be in my October reading wrap up, and I think the third one comes out in February. I'm not sure how long the series is going to be, but it was super short, super quick. I believe this is classified as YA. Rebecca Solar is the narrator. She is my favorite female narrator, so she makes it awesome as well, and I gave this one like a 3.75. Okay, then for the vampire category, I read 2 graphic novels. So I read The Accursed Vampire by Madeline McGrain. This is part of a middle grade graphic novel series. Really cute. It's about 3 like little vampire friends, and they go on like misadventures, kind of learning the history of our main little vampire who's like a little bit older than all the rest of them. There's like a mansion, there's a witch, there's a curse, and I thought it was really cute. I liked the art style, and it was a 4-star. And then I read Summer Vamp by Violet Shan Karam, and this one was stinking adorable. So this is about our main character who has recently gotten like a new stepmom, or her dad's got a new girlfriend. She's not really sure about the whole situation. She's feeling very like confused and left out. Her stepmom actually gifts her admission to this summer camp that's supposed to be for culinary people because she wants to be a chef, and she's very excited. But then she gets there and she's actually at Camp Dracula, which is a summer camp for vampires, and she is a human and she has to pretend like she's a vampire until she can find a way home. But she winds up making little vampire-y friends and still cooking and going on misadventures, and I thought this was so freaking cute. So cute. I loved it. Put this on your to read list for next year's hike-a-thon because we have a camp setting. This would be great for Summerween as well. It was super quick, and I gave this one 4 stars. Then I had 4 4-star books, so you can see why we had like a wide range. For the villain side, I read My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This is an adult thriller. It was pitched as a husband and wife move to the suburbs, have kids, and then they get bored and start murdering people. And I was like, well, that sounds fun. It was fun, but it was less fun than I expected. It was definitely heavier, which a lot of people were like, yeah, you didn't see that coming. But I don't know how to explain it. Like sometimes these concepts can be a little bit more silly or like witty and clever. This one definitely is darker. We've got some abusive topics in here. The serial killings were a little bit more intense than I was expecting. The reasoning for it was different than I was expecting. And this is not really a vigilante style novel without giving too much away. I was wondering if they were going to go around like murdering other serial killers, and that's not really what's happening. So it's good to know that going in. For some parts I didn't like about this, but it was written really well, and even though most of the characters were unlikable, I still kind of liked our main person that was narrating it. I did predict one of the major plot twists that happened in here really early on, and I personally try not to predict them because I want to enjoy the book, but I was like, ooh, I bet this is the twist. But thankfully there was more than one twist in here, and the ending was still somewhat surprising and really well done and wrapped up. Just know, not a light read, definitely darker and more intense than what you may think, but this one was still like a 4-star for me, and our narrator was excellent. Next, for the vampire category, we had Cruel Illusions by Maggie Fuston. So I have this pretty edition, but it's kind of hard to film with. So this is a young adult standalone vampire fantasy. Thank goodness for standalone fantasies. And this was like a solid one because it was a longer one. I think this was like an 18-hour audio. We got pretty much full world building and all that kind of stuff. So essentially this is about vampire slaying magician. Our main character is growing up in foster care, and she believes that a vampire has killed her mother because in this world, we're in our world, and vampires have just kind of appeared and we're having to deal with them, and it's kind of slowly becoming known that vampires are a thing. And she decides that she wants to go with the magicians and become a vampire slayer as well. There is a competition in order to get into the group that she has to participate in. There's someone that has to train her. We have a little romance in here. The only thing that I didn't love about it is there were a couple points that were a little bit slow, and then the beginning takes a little bit to get into because we talk a lot about her being in foster care and the situation with that, which was fine, except we didn't get into the more fantasy elements that are the meat of the book for a little bit, which I thought was surprising because that's the majority of what the book is about. At first it feels more like just a plain contemporary, and it takes a minute to get to the vampire portion also, but I really liked it. This was like just a fun, adventurous YA. It was giving me like Shadowhunters meets Night Circus meets Caraval, because there were just magical things happening, and we kept learning more and more about the world as it went on and uncovering things, and I really enjoyed that. It kept it really interesting. There were quite a few twists and turns in here. This is just like a fun one. It doesn't take itself super seriously, but I really enjoyed it overall, and I thought it was a solid vampire read as well. So I gave this one 4 stars. And I really enjoyed the narrator for this one as well. All right, next up for the vampire category, because I didn't know any better, was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I was so proud of myself for getting to this one because it's a 14-hour audio. However, this is also not vampires. I assumed, which is my fault again, that it was vampires based on this beautiful gothic cover, and also because The Familiar is a commonly used term in a lot of vampire novels, also witchy novels too, but there are no vampires in here, so just know that going in. However, there is magic, there is gothic goodness, we are set in 1500s Spain, and there's romance in here and magic, and I really enjoyed it still. We're following Lusa, and she has like these magical abilities that get uncovered by the person that she is working for, and then she gets noticed by Antonio Perez, who is the disgraced secretary of Spain king, and he basically takes her to the palace to go work there and show off her talents and to also compete in this like magical competition. She is like plunged into this world of seers and holy men, alchemists, and she begins to train with a man named Gillian who works at the castle, and things kind of start to unravel from there. Don't want to say too much because I feel like it's really nice to go into. Leigh Bardugo's writing style is gorgeous. I was a little bit worried jumping into this one because this is another one of her adult novels, and I've heard that Ninth House, while amazing, gets very dark and twisty in the ways that I don't like, and which you're gonna laugh at me when you see what my favorite book of the readathon was. Dips into more of those contemporary dark topics that I don't enjoy. I prefer them to be more magical or set like in a more fantasy world. This one didn't really have that. Like, it definitely has darker gothic topics, but nothing like I feel like shocking or super disturbing. The writing of this is just like lush and romantic. Our narrator is absolutely incredible. She is so good, and she just sucks you into this world. I do feel like this is a little bit more of like a slower build type type of fantasy, but it is definitely worth it. Lee's writing is just, it's so good. She's one of my favorite authors of all time. So I'm glad I finally got to it, even though it's not vampire, and this was a 4.5. Then lastly, for the villains category, and this one was probably more of a 4 rather than a 4.5, but I still think it was my favorite read of the readathon, and it just was shocking. So I read Not Even Bones by Rebecca Schaeffer. I believe this was her debut novel and is the first in a trilogy. I have the second and the third one coming on order from Pango because I decided I want to physically read them all. I physically read this one. This is a young adult novel and we are set in our world, but there are monsters, tons and tons of different kinds of monsters. I believe they all still look like us, but they eat and behave and do different things. So our main character, Anita, dissects monsters for a living. Her mother brings in these monster bodies, she dissects them, they pack them up, and they ship them on this like black market eBay type situation. She doesn't really question the morals of this, she just kind of does what she is told. She really likes dissecting things and taking them apart. A lot of these monsters are kind of bad news. There are ones that will like steal the souls of virgins and that's how they feed. There's others that feed off of pain. And one day her mother brings home a live teenage boy. His parts are better sold live and fresh. And so she draws the line there and helps him escape. But while she's doing this, she winds up being captured and kind of put in this black market situation. This was just incredibly interesting. It was very bloody and gory and dark. Like at one point she was trying to cut the ear off the live teenage boy. I was like, what is happening? But the world was so incredibly interesting with the different kinds of monsters that you were learning about and uncovering. This one set majority of it in South America, which was incredibly interesting. There is a part in the middle that is on the slower side that I didn't love. But overall, I just liked learning more and more about the world. There was like a vampire monster in here. We didn't like see him a lot, but I was like, ooh, we got a vampire too. This reminded me kind of like The Monstermologist meets This Savage Song. Definitely its own unique thing, but we've got like the dissecting of monsters and the different kinds of monsters and the morality of who is a good monster and a bad monster, and there's this whole like monster government that works with the regular government to determine like basically who should be allowed to do what. And I feel like we just kind of dipped our toe into the world in this first book and has a really cool cliffhanger at the end and a lot of action. But just know going in, not a light read. Doesn't shy away from the guts and the gore. She describes like scooping out an eyeball at one point. I was literally reading it being like, why am I okay with this? I don't know. I just felt like everything was so interesting and I really liked our main character and she was very, very morally gray. And it was just so interesting to read about. We got another character kind of midway through the book that I really found very enticing and interesting as well. And yeah, I gave it like a 4-star, maybe a 4.5. I'm gonna keep reading the series, so you'll hear me talk about that in the October wrap up. But I really enjoyed this. Just know, it's not what I typically read. And even things like This Savage Song and Monstermologist are much easier to like handle than this one. So if you're squeamish, just you've been warned. Okay, so here is everything I read for the vampire side, 6 books in total. And here's everything I read for the villain side, 6 books in total. We hit all of the reading challenges for both prompts and we hit all of the physical challenges except for Read in the Dark because I kind of forgot about that. I will link my first Not So Scary-a-thon reading vlog up in the cards if you haven't checked it out already. You can kind of see me slowly reading all these books, doing Halloween themed activities, sharing thoughts and feelings along the way. I'm currently editing the second vlog, so that'll be up really soon. And yeah, one more readathon wrapped up. I count this as a success overall, even though we had some major dislikes. We've got one readathon left. That announcement will come at the very end of October or the very beginning of November. It's my Christmas winter themed readathon, so stay tuned for that. Let me know what your favorite read was if you participated in the readathon or if any of these books piqued your interest, and I will see you guys next time on The Bright Side.